Aronra and the fallacy. Did I get his name right this time? Comment section. Let me know. So, this is an event where Aronra got asked a question. That's a loaded question. He responds by unloading the question first and then answers the correct version of that question, and then perhaps commits a fallacy, an appeal to ignorance. I'll cover both the problems of the loaded question, the question in full, Aronra's potential fallacy, why it is or is not a fallacy, and further objections to the Christian God based on this exchange here.
This question's for Arn. You mentioned that in 20 years of rigorous research, you found no evidence, I think you said, of Christianity. But
No, that's not what I said.
It would be quite silly for somebody to have gone 20 years without any evidence of Christianity, because obviously you're going to have evidence that Christianity is a thing. It's a religion, it's a doctrine, it's 33% of the known world believes in it, just about. So yeah, of course you're not going to not find evidence of that, but the question is malformed. What he means is something different than what he's asking. But we have to intuit that, because we can't just take it literally, although I guess we could, and if we did, then it would again mean that I'm asking you basically, when did you last stop beating your wife? It assumes a number of things and is a loaded question. You said that you've never found evidence of Christianity in these 20 years, but I'm here and I'm a Christian, so what do you say now, dumb atheist? Ha ha ha! Pwn! Checkmate!
I said in 20 years of arguing with Christians that they told me that I'm wrong about the belief in faith, that faith is not a belief that is not based on evidence. Right? I say that faith is a belief that is not based on evidence. They all say, oh yeah, we have evidence. I say, okay, fine. What is it? And I've always specified that I'm looking for scientific evidence. They ask, what evidence would I accept? I said, how much evidence would you accept? They would ask. I said, I'll take anything that qualifies as evidence. Any body of objectively verifiable facts which positively indicate or exclusively concord with that particular position over any other.
So Aronra is responding by outlining what his statement has been and is. That his argument is, in essence, that faith is to him defined as a belief without evidence. And by evidence, he means scientific evidence. JMD Apologetics, who uploaded this video, displays on screen several apologetic arguments for God. Arguments in and of themselves are not evidence for anything. They contain perhaps evidence in their premises, but aren't evidence for the things. People get confused on this a lot, and they really don't like it when you point out that arguments are not evidence when they don't really know that much about logic. They see that as some sort of failure on your part. No, it's a reflection of reality. Arguments are not evidence of things. Otherwise, I could just make an argument that I have $1 million and then go to the bank and withdraw the $1 million. That's not how reality works. Now, if you have a valid and sound argument, is that evidence that the conclusion is true? In the logical system itself, it's not called evidence. It's called a proof. Outside of logic, no, it wouldn't be evidence. It would be still an argument that would lead us to that conclusion, and that conclusion is probably sound if logic is still functioning correctly. Could be that we incorrectly analyzed the argument and thought it was without flaws, when in fact it is. But every single argument shown by JMD is not evidence or contains scientific evidence for God directly. At best, you could say that some of these arguments have scientific evidence that, if you look at it in the certain apologetic way, kind of maybe sort of point to a God-ish, depending on what God is, and you really need to have your God glasses on to see it. But if you're a logician of any stripe. I consider myself an amateur logician, but whether I'm better than that, you can decide for yourself. But nonetheless, if you understand logic, you'll know that every single one of these arguments has one or more logical fallacies, and thus, whatever its conclusion is, wouldn't be evidence that that conclusion is anything, even if we said the arguments were evidence, which they aren't. And since they're not valid and sound, we have to be skeptical of the conclusion. It might be that the conclusion is still true independent of the argument, but we have no reason to logically conclude that that's the case. Worse off, the scientific evidences that are contained in some of these arguments usually rely upon misunderstandings of the scientific evidence, misapplications of scientific evidence, quotes from scientists, not actual evidence itself, cherry picking of evidence, and just sometimes outright pure lies about what the science says. If science did indicate God, then that would be within the normal academia of science. But that's not what we see. We only see arguments from God come from theists, and when they are made from people that happen to be scientists, they always argue for that outside of science. There's a reason for that. And this reason is exactly what Aronra is saying is the case. There's no scientific evidence for the God in and of itself. Pointing to the thing that you think is God would not be evidence for God. Just show him God via science. And that's something that most theists will say you can't do. And the reason that those theists would say that is because they conceive of God not as a natural phenomenon, but as a supernatural phenomenon. Thus, you could never use a naturalistic methodology such as science to discover God. So, Aronra is right. Not only has he never been presented evidence, at least scientific evidence of God, but also he could never be presented with scientific evidence of a Christian God. If you presented him with scientific evidence of a God, it wouldn't be the God of Christians, or it would be a very different God than they've been proposing for all these years.
In 20 years,
I think
without exception,
Okay.
there has been no one to present any scientific evidence that actually indicates the Christian God, or indeed any God, or in fact anything supernatural at all.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification. So, you mentioned that in 20 years of rigorous research, you found no evidence of what you're looking for.
I really don't understand what JMD Apologetics is trying to indicate by saying he gets your argument from ignorance over Aronra's faith there. Because Aronra is not making an appeal to ignorance in that moment. He's simply stating something that is a fact from his point of view. That he's never been given scientific evidence of God. And if he has been, then somehow he missed that. And also, if he has been, then anybody that's saying that God is supernatural would be wrong. So it wouldn't be the typical Christian God at any rate. Although it could be a version of the Christian God that is a natural God. But I would dare think that that would blow away JMD Apologetics' idea of God and many other Christian ideas of God as well. Nonetheless, this questioner completely ignores what Aronra's statement is and says, well, yeah, you haven't gotten what you wanted. No, that's not what he said. Interact with what he actually said. I've never been given scientific evidence of this. Okay, great. Here's scientific evidence of it. Or, well, I don't have access to that. Fine. At least you're on the same page. Let's continue.
But then when Michael pressed you on naming just one scholar who defines the word faith in the way you put it, you couldn't name one.
Yes, and that's completely and totally irrelevant, and here's why. Let's say that Aronra said, here's a scholar that says that the word faith means this. Well, then what your objection would change to is, aha, appeal to authority. So what if one scholar has said that? Maybe you have several scholars. Maybe you have a consensus of scholars. None of that would be proof that that's what it is. Words don't work like that. I think I had a whole talk about natural language not that long ago. In fact, it's my last live hangout. The fact of the matter is there's no way to prove what faith is in the sense of a dictionary definition. All you could do is say, well, this is what this dictionary says, or this is what this encyclopedia says, and I agree with that. But you don't need to. Maybe what you're trying to do is say, aha, you're a hypocrite because you're not applying the methodology of I need scientific evidence to everything. You haven't applied that you need scientific evidence for what the word faith is, so therefore you're a hypocrite. Ha ha ha, checkmate. But even if that's the case, that doesn't make him wrong. Being a hypocrite isn't a logical fallacy. So what? It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. And it wouldn't be proof even if he had cited somebody. This is his definition of the word faith. It doesn't have to line up or agree with anybody else's definition. All that has to be done is show him the thing that he's asking for. Scientific evidence. That's it. Who cares what faith is according to whoever scholars or encyclopedias or dictionaries or whatever. You're not interacting with what the claim being made is outside of what that word is, because that debate doesn't even really matter. Just understand his point of view on what he thinks the word faith is. You don't have to agree with it. He's like, well, in my definition of faith, faith is blah, whatever blah is, and okay, great. And we have different questions about that. But in Aronra's definition of faith, it is this other thing. Now interact with that definition or don't, but be honest intellectually about it. But of course, this questioner can't do that.
So my question is, could it be possible that your research is maybe flawed, biased, and even maybe dangerous to the pursuit of truth?
What a horribly loaded question that is. That's poisoning of the well as well. It just is intellectually dishonest and disingenuous for you to frame this question in that way. Couldn't it be that your whole thing is malformed and you're not really interested in getting to the truth? Here's the thing. You want to object most likely to the idea of scientism, which, I don't know, maybe Aronra is in favor of it. I have no idea here. Maybe you could just ask. Now, it might be that in this case, for God, and only for God, is Aaron asking for scientific evidence. And in other aspects of life, he might not demand that. And you might say, well, that's not fair, that's not consistent. Who cares? It doesn't have to be. No one said that his thing has to apply the same way across every single thing. And that's an error that many apologists do when they think, oh, I know what your worldview is, and you're not sticking to it. You don't know what my worldview is or isn't, and it might not be one where that I stick to it in everything, because the way I view the world might not be in this way that you view the world. Maybe just ask me instead of assuming. But nonetheless, this guy's question is completely a poisoning of the well, completely loaded, because Aronra cannot answer it in the way that it's presented. It's like, could it be secretly that you're a liar and everything that you said is a lie and that you're a con artist? Well, it could be, but I'm not going to answer that. I'm not even going to dignify that. I'm just gonna come back when you have a logical question to ask me, not a loaded one. Having said all that, is the pursuit of truth something that we can get to using the scientific method? Maybe. Do we have to include other types of philosophy on there? Maybe not. I don't know. Many people have objected to the idea that everything will eventually or already is reducible to the scientific method. And that's an objection against scientism in and of itself. And of course, the notion of scientism might be something akin to everything needs to be proven via science. And all you have to say is, aha, you haven't proven that. But of course I could modify the statement and say everything except for this statement has to be proven by science. Then what's your objection? If you're going to say that you have evidence, but it's not scientific evidence, then what the bleep does evidence even mean now? Philosophical evidence? What is that? How does that work? How can you be sure it is anything at all? What would be the methodology? It sounds like we're looking for a system that's rigorous that can get us to a conclusion where something is actually evidence or isn't evidence and should be discarded. Some people bring in ethics and morals as a possible thing where science might not apply, but it might be that we just haven't developed the language to do so yet. The objection to scientism, I don't think, is really one that we necessarily need to go into here unless it was absolutely the case that we knew Aronra was using it. All we do know is that for God, Aronra is making a claim that no scientific evidence has been presented to him in all the time that he's been doing it. And all you'd have to do is simply present that scientific evidence, or at least be honest enough to admit you're right, there isn't scientific evidence, but have you considered these apologetic arguments that are full of logical fallacies? Yeah, I have. Well, I have. I can't speak for Aronra. I've considered them. They're full of logical fallacies and bad science when they do have science in them. So, no, none of those work either. What else you got? Some other philosophy that I wouldn't call evidence? You can call anything you want evidence, but you're going to have to demonstrate that it is evidence, and you're also going to have to demonstrate that your system is coherent. And right now, there's only two systems that do that: the scientific method and logic. If you want to invent a third way to know that something is a thing and be sure about it, great. Do that. Come to us when you've got a complete version of whatever that is. We'll look it over, see if it works, and if it works just as good or better than what we've got, then we'll include it as a system. And then you can say you have evidence in there if it belongs in that system and works in that system. But nobody's done that yet, and I don't think anybody will, but I could be wrong. I've been waiting for somebody to show that I'm wrong, but nobody has done that. Anyways, Aronra doesn't respond to the loaded and poisoned to the well question, and I really don't blame him.
Conducted this experiment, as I explained, over and over and over and over again, having this exact conversation at least once a week for 20 years. Not one Christian ever has produced evidence. He didn't either, nor can you. No one can. It doesn't exist.
That's not the debate
tonight. I demand that anybody in this room who calls yourself a Christian, if you think you have scientific evidence to indicate you're God, bring it. You ain't got it. I win.
Now, Aaron is right up to a point. He didn't have it. His opponent didn't give him scientific evidence. You don't have it. You don't know that. You don't know that the person making the question right then and there doesn't have the scientific evidence. Maybe they do, and they're just not giving it to you because they're an asshole or something. I don't know. But you don't know that they don't have it. You can't make that claim. You could have said, do you have it? If you do, give it to me. Whether or not it's the debate at hand, because I don't know what that debate was about per se, but it's irrelevant. This is the point that he's making, and it doesn't necessarily have to be connected to the debate because questions aren't always going to be connected to the debate anyways, and sometimes answering them will distract from the debate, and you can decide not to answer them because it's nothing to do with the debate, or you can decide to answer them. In any case, you still haven't given him what he's asking for. Everyone here in the room has an opportunity to give him that scientific evidence. And I don't see a bunch of people rushing forward to do that. You don't even see one person coming to give him that. But then the statement that he makes that nobody has it is unwarranted. We can't say that for sure. We can only say that within the time that Aronra has done this, he's never gotten it. I'll add myself to that problem and say within the time that I've been doing this, I've never seen it either. I've never gotten it. I've never been referred to it. I've not seen a valid and sound argument, nor any scientific evidence for a God, whatever that God might be. Not yet, but I'm still waiting. And the burden is not upon me, but it is upon whoever thinks that there is that thing to show me that that's the thing. Now, I don't say scientific evidence, although the first two things that I do ask for could be condensed probably into the scientific method: empirical evidence, repeatable testing. And I follow with, or a valid and sound argument. Nobody has given me that yet, but that doesn't mean that nobody ever will. I can't make that last statement. Aronra says nobody has it, but he can't know and I can't know that nobody has it. We can only know that so far nobody has given us that. I don't know why no one has. I actually investigated to see if there was any scientific anything that I could find, and there isn't. So I'm pretty satisfied that, yeah, there isn't anything. But I might have missed something. What could I have missed? I don't know. But whatever that is, if you think you have it, then just give me the dang scientific evidence. And if you don't have that, then you don't have the thing that Aronra is asking for. You don't have the thing that I've been asking for. You don't have the thing that many skeptics and atheists have been asking for. And many times apologetics will complain that this is a problem. Well, but we can never prove God to you because God isn't the sort of thing that we can give you scientific evidence for. And we kind of go, well, that's a problem, isn't it? How do you know that it's a God at all? How do you know anything about it then? If you don't have proof of it? Well, we have proof. Really? What kind of proof? Well, it's not scientific proof. Oh, okay. So what is it then? Here's this bad argument, and round we go. So here's the problem outlined, in essence. If God is supernatural, no scientific evidence could ever be given. Thus, Ra did not commit the fallacy. If God does not exist, no scientific evidence could ever be given, so Ra didn't commit the fallacy. If God is natural, scientific evidence could exist for God, and thus Ra did commit the fallacy. To say that no one could ever give scientific evidence of God can only be a fallacy if God is something that we could give scientific evidence for. Most Christians conceive of a God as a supernatural thing, thus they cannot make this objection. Those that are okay with God being natural could make this objection. Consider this statement as another example. No one is immortal. If Jesus is not mortal, then that statement is wrong. If Jesus is mortal, then the statement is true. If Jesus does not exist, the statement is true. So the only way for JMD and others to object to this is to agree that God could be natural. Otherwise, Ra didn't commit the fallacy. But he said he did. So therefore, God could be natural. Oopsie. Well, the whole thing's kind of a moot point because we still don't have empirical evidence, or repeatable tests, or a valid and sound argument for God in the first place, and unless and until we do, we should be skeptical of the conclusion.